everyone. The evidence for evolution is all around us. Whether we're peering at genes under a microscope or marveling at big picture patterns in nature. Darwin spent a huge chunk of his book on the origin of species detailing these consistent evolutionary signals, and since his time, our view of evolution's footprint has only become more crystal clear. Fossils are like nature's photo album. They're tangible records showing that life in the past wasn't the same as life we see today. By analyzing the age of fossils and comparing them worldwide, scientists piece together a timeline of who lived when. You can imagine flipping through an ancient family scrapbook. This fossil record reveals a gradual shift in forms across millions of years. Take whales and horses, for example. Their fossil transitions are some of the most detailed. Horse fossils in particular show a steady transition from a tiny dog-like ancestor about 55 million years ago, as we can see right here, to a familiar gazer we know today. See this one over here. And you look at the size, you see the large compared to the small. As Earth's climate shifted from a wooded forest, see here, the wooded forest, to a prairie, open prairies, horse teeth and leg bones adapted for nibbling tough grasses and sprinting away from predators. Over time, these evolving horses' relatives branched out in all sorts of directions. We call that adaptive radiation. But only one genus, though, the Equus survives in multiple species today. So, if we see here, there we go. Fossils support evolution by revealing connections between ancient and modern organisms. They show gradual changes, extinction events, and transition forms, thus providing a record of how life on Earth has evolved over time. And adaptive radiation is an evolutionary process where a single ancestral species diversifies into multiple species, each adapted to different ecological niches, often triggered by environmental changes or new opportunities. This whole fossil saga is a powerful statement to evolution in action. When you spot a modern horse trotting down the trail next time, you're literally seeing the latest chapter in a 55 million year story, a story written bone by bone in the fossil records. Let's now look next at evidence of evolution found in anatomy and embryology of organisms. Body's anatomy also provides us with evidence of evolution. If you hold up an arm bone of a human, a dog's front limbs, a bird's wings, or a whale's flipper, you'll notice they're all constructed with the same basic plan. You see you got two bones in the forearm, you got actually one in the upper arm, and then you got a few wrist bones, and then you got digits in the hand and the fingers. They're all constructed like that. You see that here. Even though, of course, not all look exactly the same, but the fundamental plan is the same. Even though these species took different evolutionary paths, they have the same basic blueprint. Scientists call these homologous structures, and they're telltale sign that these critters share a common ancestor in the evolutionary story. So you see here, homologous structure have similar features in different species. They are inherited from a common ancestor, displaying divergent evolution. Then there are the oddballs, leftover pieces called vestigial structures, like the pelvic bones in some snakes. Yep, snakes with hip bones. These relics once had a function in the ancestors, like who had legs, but now they're sort of hanging out without a job. There's other examples too: wings of flightless birds, teeny pelvic bones in whales, and the eye of cave-dwelling animals that don't see anything anyway. They're hints of creatures these organisms used to be. So, vestigial structures were once functional in an organism's ancestor, but have lost much of or all of their original function through evolution. We also see convergent forms in totally unrelated species that live in similar environments, like the Arctic fox's fur or the ptarmigan's feathers. Both go white in winter to hide from predators in the snowy landscape. They didn't get that look from the same ancestor, but rather from facing the same survival pressure. That's convergent evolution. Different lineages, same fashion choice. See here, convergent evolution is the independent evolution of similar traits in unrelated or distantly related species, often as an adaptation to similar environmental pressures or ecological niches. Embryology adds another clue. Think of it as watching the construction process of an organism. All vertebrate embryos, including us humans, have gills at some point, but only fish keep them into adulthood, while we land dwellers lose them along the way. Similar, humans and our great ape cousins grow a tail in the womb, which then disappears before birth, most of it at least. So even if adult forms look wildly different, they often share these embryonic throwback traits that hint at a common blueprint. Embryology and evolution is body structures demonstrate in their embryonic development that different species often exhibit striking similarities, suggesting a common ancestry. Well, the moral of the story? Whatever we're talking, bones, leftover limbs, or embryonic gills, all these similarities and differences tie back to how species branch from one common ancestor and adapt to new lifestyle. It's like reading the genetic footprints across time. Pretty amazing how much of the past still peeks through in living organisms today. All right, let's find some more evolutionary evidence. Let's talk about biogeography. Here's the big picture. Where organisms live on Earth is not random. It lines up with both evolution and the shift of tectonic plates. Phew, now we're really talking a long, long time ago. Think of continents moving like rafts on Earth's molten underbelly. See, here are some rafts, continents, and then they move around at some point. And that some point was about 200 million years ago. It was then when the supercontinent Pangaea started breaking up, which explains why groups that evolved before that event show up all over the world, while those that evolved afterwards only are in region-specific areas. Case in point, the plant family of Protocea is found in Australia, Southern Africa, and South America. See, right in these areas. The best explanation is that these plants took root back when those land masses were still one big southern supercontinent called Gondwana, then rolled along on drifting continents like stowaways. Australia's marsupials are another shining example. The continent's been isolated for so long that mammals there took a different evolutionary turn. Australia brims with endemic species, animals and plants found only on that island continent, because water acts like a giant moat blocking new arrivals. Over time, these isolated populations adapt and diverge, ending up with new species that don't exist anywhere else in the world. Similar stories are the famous Galapagos finches and the uniquely adapted species on the Hawaiian Islands that can also not found anywhere else. Yet, if you look back far enough, you see they have distant relatives on mainlands, meaning they all share ancestor but evolved on their remote island laboratories in wonderfully different ways. It's basically life's version of continental drift meets local invention. Biogeography studies the geographic distribution of organisms. This provides insight by revealing how and why species are located where they are, and it also studies how their distributions are shaped by factors like climate, geology, and also historical events. So now we're next going to go to molecular biology and look at some evidence in there. Let's talk about molecules as a tale of evidence. Just like how bones can hint at a shared blueprint, the very building blocks of life do the same. Case in point, DNA is the genetic material for pretty much all living things. And if you zoom in on how cells copy and interpret DNA, you'll notice the same fundamental processes everywhere. This universality is strong evidence that all life shares a common ancestor. We've simply modified the original kit in different ways over the eons. But the details can still differ between the three domains of life, the bacteria, archaea, and eukarya. For instance, certain ribosomal components and membrane structures vary, reflecting deep evolutionary splits, yet the basic machinery is close enough to reveal their family ties. DNA sequences also show us the actual blueprint of how new traits evolve. Imagine your genome as a big library of instruction manuals. If you accidentally get an extra copy of one manual, that duplicate can be tinkered with through mutation, selection, and genetic drift, while the original keeps doing its normal job. Over time, that tinkering can produce a brand new function. It's basically evolution's clever way of saying, let's keep what works and experiment with the spare. So, whether it's the near universal genetic code or the freedom that duplicate genes provide, molecular biology offers a powerful peek behind the curtain at how organisms adapt and diversify. And it all points to the same big picture. We are branches on one colossal evolutionary tree. So, molecular biology provides us with insights into genetic changes, evolutionary relationships, and the mechanisms driving adaptation on the molecular level. That then brings us to the speciation next, the process where populations diverge and become distinct species.